Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Before I go any further, we're going to talk to Luke Jones about the Orioles and about Manny Machado and about Brandon Hyde, about spring training games and about anything else that Yusniel Diaz that's on your mind. But before I go any further, I want to thank the folks from There Goes My Hero and the folks at Link. And Link is it's a Baltimore company. They're down in the Silo Point. And linkservices.com, Kevin and George, who invited me over on Sunday. George's sister is battling leukemia. They're trying to find a donor for her, and our friends at There Goes My Hero are doing that. My wife's coming up now on 5 years on March 20th. So I just want to give some love to Hero and the friends at Link and the people that I met, as well as Darryl Green, who came up from the Washington Redskins and participated on Sunday. So a big shout-out. Wearing his Hall of Fame jacket and looking all Hall of Fame and taking all my Baltimore grief as he has been known to do. So big shout out to Darryl Green for that. Last thing, and before I get into baseball here, because this will sort of set the tone for baseball. And Luke, I want to welcome you in to this thing. And just start with this. Do you keep all your ticket stubs? Like, do you have your dad's 1979 ticket stubs or his Usher stuff? Or, I mean, do you have like a box of stuff, swag, memorabilia, old stuff?
I have, my mom has his old Usher hat. I don't recall too many ticket stubs. I mean, I've kept many of mine. Okay. And I haven't necessarily organized it, but yeah.
It's like your Camden Yards 90s tickets. You have those from when you were 15 years old.
I have that kind of stuff. I have a seat, the back of a seat, upper deck seat from Memorial Stadium when the Ravens played the Oilers the last game there.
Okay, all right.
Some people were kicking out seats, and there was just a big pile of them there that Safe Management individual put there, and I stuffed one in my starter Ravens coat.
Attaboy.
leaving 33rd Street, so I have that. Yeah, I have some stuff like that. I mean, stuff that I've bought over the years, stuff I've just happened to collect. And
you're going to be blown away because you don't know I have this stuff. I'm like sort of you can only imagine because you've seen the stuff I've put online, right? Ticket stubs, stuff like that. We're going to go through here and find stuff, and we're just going to talk about it and have some fun. I think my wife's going to hold the camera down on some of the actual items, and we're going to, sort of mess the studio up a little bit here and utilize the glass space I have for some storytelling. There's a rumor that alcohol and Pizza John's could be involved. So I know the Pizza John's part. I'm confirmed on that. I got to get the King Discount Liquors and organize all that, but we're going to have a good time on Wednesday night doing that. And, and I think it is a real kickoff for you and I to talk about baseball. And I know we're not going to have a lot of long, awesome, cool conversations about games and pennant races. We know that going in. I'm trying to sort of make the best of this that I can in 2019, all these years in, and say what's important to me and things, but there's not a lot of current things percolating, but it is a very, very weird week and a very, very weird year and a weird month that Messina goes in the Hall of Fame. He has this no-hat thing going on. It's like he was never an Oriole at all. We're going to deal with that, the death of Frank Robinson, and now Manny Machado in a San Diego Padre hat. It's been a weird, weird month, man. That's all I can say.
Well, how about the fact that it's Manny Machado with the San Diego Padres and not the Yankees or not even the Phillies?
Not even the White Sox, right?
Right. I mean, it's not as though the Padres came out of nowhere completely because the last few weeks there had been steam to them being at least perceived as a real player. Now, I
perceived maybe as a stalking horse, right?
Right. So I think from the standpoint of it's surprising just because everyone assumed he was going to wind up with the Yankees. And it turns out, based on different reports that you hear, that they never really even got close. I mean, they had a dinner. I think they spoke in some generalities as far as contract, but they never really got to talking terms.
Fair to say they weren't Johnny Hustle and signing him.
Right, exactly. they weren't sprinting down the first base trying to sign him. But, I think it's fascinating. I'll say this. Look, we can all debate the virtues of Manny Machado and hustling down the first base and incidents he's been involved
I just don't like
knuckleheads.
I never, like from the time I was 9 years old and I was on a little league team, my dad hated hot dogs, never wanted me to be one of them, although I wound up being quite the showman in my own time. I certainly was never that kind of guy on a baseball team. You know what I mean? Like, there was, and as much as we talk about Joe Flacco and his departure, he's the antithesis of that guy, right? Like, literally, right? Like, literally the antithesis of the hot dog guy or the not hustle guy. And, the one team has shown him the gate, and the Machado thing, the real harm in Machado for the organization is they really didn't get much for him, and they will talk about using LD, whatever, but
sure.
They didn't get what they could have gotten to rebuild this thing better, and that's going to be every time Gausman takes the ball for the Braves, we're going to be talking about that. So that's going to be a recurring theme as we either watch or don't watch these young players get better, because quite frankly, in Machado, the really interesting part about it is he's going away. I mean, I saw the comparisons to Robinson Cano. That when he signed in Seattle, it's just sort of like, does he even play in the sport anymore? Is he like a Colorado Rocky? Where is he, right?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting in that regard. And to bring it back to what you mentioned in the context of the Orioles, at least he's not going to be in their face 19 times a year.
Sure.
Playing for the Yankees, playing for the Red Sox, that kind of a scenario, which I think many people almost expected over the last couple years.
And that was far out of the control of the Orioles or the fan base
exactly.
or anyone, right?
But you're right. I mean, I think the biggest regret is not that the Orioles didn't give him a $300 million 10-year contract, although I certainly wouldn't have said no to that kind of a possibility if the circumstances in this organization were different right now. But certainly missed opportunities to not have signed him to a 6-year deal, say, in 2015, and then they could have traded him at this point and gotten a king's ransom kind of a return for Manny Machado for 2 or 3 years of Manny Machado to a team like the Dodgers or a team like whoever you want to throw out there. So there's always going to be regret.
So you think the way to do this would have been to give him $110 million 3 years ago?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that was something that wasn't even in the mind's eye of this organization. And quite frankly, I was kind of shocked that Machado knew who I was at the All-Star game. I mean, I sort of famously haven't had a press pass during his era. I'm in my 13th year. I'm just assuming I'm going to be banned again this year, which is just as well because I'm too busy saving the city with my Baltimore Positive initiative. But, when I talked to him down in D.C. at the All-Star game, when I got up on him, he absolutely knew who I was and why I was there and what I was asking, and could not have been any more animated about how they never, ever really ever even tried to sign him.
Yeah, I mean, and reports have been out there, and I think John Heyman, even over the winter at some point, put it out there. I mean, there were some discussions, and this is going all the way back to, I want to say this was the off-season post-second knee surgery, I think. Don't quote me on that, but there were some conversations at that point, but not to the point where anything ever got serious. I mean, it came down to this. If the Orioles had offered him, say, in the offseason going into 2015, a 6-year, $90 million contract or something along those lines, they probably could have gotten something done, and they would have bought out first couple years of free agency. Now, that said, and this is where I will take up for them to a degree, at that point, he was a year plus removed from, or 2 years removed from back-to-back knee surgery. So it definitely, there was some risk involved there that they were going to take.
And that's kind of where the Ravens are with Mosley. If Mosley had been a healthier player,
I mean, that's
but
the reality.
If Mosley had been a healthier player, he might have been done quicker. And I would say the same thing with Machado. When both of his knees were ripped up, it probably wasn't like a real ideal time to be offering him $100 million, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably would have been receptive to that, but how many, and not just the Orioles, how many teams at that point would have been willing to do that with a guy coming off of 2 knee surgeries in a 10-month period? I think it was, October of 13 and then August of 14?
Yeah, so, you know what? You forget how devastating both of those incidents were.
Right.
For him, for the organization, and the fact that he did come back and and play.
Fine.
Right, sure.
Now, granted, let's be clear about this. This wasn't a ruptured patella tendon ACL. He had a genetic defect with his knees that basically they were corrected. So I can't remember the exact medical terminology, but it's not as though he tore every knee ligament that he had. But the point is, he was fine. But at that point in time, yeah, there was some, there definitely would have been some trepidation, some risk for any team to give a player that kind of contract. But if they had done it at that point, yeah, they would have had him under control for a couple more years. They could have dealt him at any point, whether it was at the trade deadline, last offseason, this offseason with the new regime, and you could have gotten an absolute king's ransom for him because it would have been Manny Machado at, 17, 18, 19, 20 million per year for the next couple years. Any team would sign up for that. So, in that regard, yeah, you're always going to look at that unless if Yusniel Diaz becomes Yoenis Cespedes or becomes a Yasiel Puig kind of guy, then I think you'll look at it in a much more comforting way to say, okay, there's a missed opportunity, but
did we get a Major League Baseball player?
It still worked out pretty well, yeah. Right. And if Dean Kramer becomes a number 4 starter for them, he was part of that deal, then it looks even better. So, but bring it back to Manny Machado. I think it's fascinating him winding up in San Diego to the point that you mentioned. It's not a high-profile place, although, and this is where I kind of feel people that have completely desecrated the idea, just completely defecated on the idea of him going to the Padres. This game is every year becoming more and more about what? Young, cheap, controllable talent. And the San Diego Padres have the best farm system in baseball right now. I'll say this. As much as right now we say, he's never going to win in San Diego. The Padres stink. They've stunk.
They may be getting Justin Verlander before they get Justin Verlander, and they probably did not have an Altuve. You know what I mean? If they have one, great, but at least they have something. Hey, look, they're trying, dude. I got a closet full of Padres stuff. I'm looking at my Tony Gwynn jersey sitting here in my closet, and my Padres jacket, and my Padres hat. I'm a closet Padre fan. You know that. I don't know that it's the greatest signing in the world, but I'm not going to condemn it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm just not. They've made a lot of money. It's their money to piss away, and at least they got a really good baseball player out of it, which is all.
I think one of the other interesting elements here, and I think you can appreciate this, of course, as someone who's been to San Diego plenty of times, the Padres are the only show in town there now. I mean, the Chargers are gone, so there is an opportunity there, as challenging as it is, because it's San Diego, and there's plenty of great, fun, outdoors type things to do beyond just going and watching a mediocre baseball.
I've heard that about that place.
If they can capture the imagination of that city, which is a big city considering they have one major sports franchise now, with the Chargers being gone, there's an opportunity. And I'll say this much, and I'll leave it at this, because look, prospects are prospects, and there's no guarantee that they're going to work out. But a year ago at this time, none of us were talking about the Atlanta Braves being a team that was going to win 90 games. And then we found out they had Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna and some other good young players on the way. And, they ended up being a playoff team and one of the great stories in baseball. So I don't think the Padres are going to be great this year. I think they're probably still a year away as far as some of the young talent that they have. And, yes, they still have some question marks. There's no doubt. But Hosmer last year, Manny Machado this year, certainly a big signal to their fan base. And I'll say this, considering the kind of personality that Manny is, I always was skeptical whether New York would have been a good place for him because of some of the lapses, because of some of the criticism. And look, I think some of that stuff has spiraled out of control. I'll remind everyone, Manny Machado, there have been plenty of players who have staked him as being a really good teammate, even some this past week that spoke about it. And for as much as you might dog him for not running down the line every single time, we just talked about the 2 major knee surgeries he had, and since those 2 surgeries, 162 games played, 157 games played, 156 games played, 162 games played. So even if he doesn't sprint down the first base every single time, and yes, that bothers me as just how I personally view that type of stuff, at the same time, he's played in a heck of a lot of games, and he's played at a really high level, and the Padres are getting a heck of a player. And if some of those prospects that they have pan out in the next couple of years, that could be a really interesting team Maybe not in 2019, but 2020, 2021, and beyond. And if not, then he'll probably opt out after 5 years, and he'll wind up with the Yankees at age 31. How about that?
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Get a little baseball conversation in here. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks that I trust with my property here. They have over 50 years of experience, local buyers and sellers, just like yourself, locating the finest properties and negotiating the best deals. Also on the front of a local magazine, too. Pretty cool. I read up on Lee. I learned a lot about Lee, man. So go to LeeTessier.com. I met Lee during the Leukemia Lymphoma Society Man of the Year a couple years ago. And we have a dear friend running for Woman of the Year this year. We'll be telling you about Jen, another Jen Strong we have out of Harford County, and a good story there with my friends with the Della Rose group and some other folks. So we got some great stories about saving lives, good stuff happening. It's all brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing, sponsor of our community and charity series. They've been there. I got to get my new notes here. It says 99 years on my reads. It's now 100 years. I got to get that right, correct that. Don't let it goof on your roof. Trust our friends at Cole Roofing. Bill Cole joins us here on a weekly basis. They also do some solar. We are going to be doing some robotics together next week as well with the Ray Lewis folks and some stuff going on at the Star Academy. And I'm also doing a term with Bill Cole with Western High School and some robotics and some future thinking stuff there as well. That's going to be going on in April and May. So stay tuned to our Facebook and our Twitter and our LinkedIn, all the stuff we're doing out here, as well as our Baltimore Positive Initiative that I'm doing with Don Moeller. Don's up in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. We talk some sports this week as well, so we'll get together and argue once a week. We're going to be using our Thursdays, every Thursday morning, to make Baltimore better and telling the stories that are going to make Baltimore better and challenging local leaders to lead and make Baltimore better. I'm a little fed up, if you haven't heard, and I'm not going to be quiet about it. I think Luke knows that because he hangs out with me long and loud enough. And one last shout-out for Luke and I on baseball. On Wednesday night, we're going to be here in the studio doing all things Orange and probably some Colt stuff and some Raven stuff, some old-school stuff. I have all of my old swag in 4 giant boxes. The best stuff, not everything, but like stuff that aren't pictures that you've seen on the internet, maybe some ticket stubs you've seen, maybe you haven't. But I'm going to be sharing some cool stuff here this week. Wednesday night, after the Terps game, Luke and I are going to watch the Penn State game. Then we're going to jam on memorabilia and swag and some storytelling and all that good stuff as well. Last shout-out, our friends at Royal Farms Coffee. I'll probably be drinking the Kona blend here on Wednesday as we go all night. Don't forget about the ROFO Rewards card. There's nothing better than that. If you're getting your gas and you're gassing up, you use that. You get your points, and then you get your fried chicken, your Western fries for free. Only thing that makes it taste better is when it's free. Royal Farms, real fresh. God, it's been a little while since I've had Western fries. I'm kind of embarrassed. I haven't had them since before the Super Bowl, so I got to get to my Royal Farms down the street and see if I can run into Justin Tucker and sing with him. All right, baseball, Luke. Orioles, I've been putting it off. We've talked about the death of Frank Robinson. We've talked about Mike Messina. We've talked about Manny Machado. What we have not talked a whole lot about is Yusniel Diaz, who went deep into the night on Masson to start the season. And, look, I take all these games with a grain, right? I've been at this a long time. I'm not here to praise it or urinate upon it. It's spring training. It's practice. We're talking practice, man. So I don't get crazy about it. But that being said, this is the time to watch these guys a little bit when they decide to put them on television. And when they do, I'll be watching. I know you will be as well. But it's things like this that it's all you have to hang your hat on right now, right?
Yeah, and look, I don't say this for anyone to be happy about it, but we know this team's not going to be good this year. That's the understatement. I think the most...
finally an honest man appears in Luke Jones. You won't hear that over at the Fan.
But that said, now, whether they avoid 100 losses, whether at 105 losses, whatever it is.
By the way, over-under was 58.5. I told you that wins,
yeah,
right?
I've seen that. I know. I think it was one of the projection sites, the Pacoda, Zips, those types of projections. One had them at, I think, 62 and 100. So,
dude, 58.5 is a very, very interesting proposition, right?
I'd be intrigued to take the over.
You would take the over on that because you're an optimist on that. And if you're rooting for 59, like if 59 and 103,
that's an optimist, by the way.
dude, you win the bet. You win the bet. If they lose 103 games, you cash a ticket in Vegas. I mean, that is an interesting wagering proposition. I think for anyone that follows this team, there's not a lot interesting about this team. That's interesting for me.
You're right. But the win-loss record aside, and understanding that they're not going to be good, we know that. We don't need to preface every single statement we make about the Orioles about that. We understand
you know what?
that.
You didn't say that nicely. They're not going to be good. No, dude, they're going to be awful.
Of course.
What they're going to be is awful. So there's
there's nothing interesting about saying that over and over.
Not at all. We shouldn't say that around here. That'll never sell.
But my point is, if you do focus in on a few things to watch this year, a few individuals to watch this year, that's how you try to find some level of interest, enjoyment in where they are. And to this point, I mean, look, we're a couple games into spring training. I don't care if they win or lose spring training games. What was it, in 16 when they last made the playoffs? I want to say wasn't that the year they started like 0-11 in Grapefruit League and everyone was...
Yeah.
So,
they had a couple of really bad grapefruits.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is what... But you're looking at individual performances. It was nice to see Yusniel Diaz go deep on Saturday. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what his development looks like. I don't anticipate him starting the year in Baltimore. Probably will go to AAA to begin the year. And if he continues to develop and continues to get stronger as he did from 17 to 18 with the Dodgers organization, then we're going to see him in Baltimore, probably playing right field at some point later this summer, certainly by 2020. So, you look at guys like him, you look at some of the incumbents. I'm very much intrigued to look at some of these pitchers. Not that I think anyone's going to blossom into the next Cy Young Award winner for the Orioles, but one of the things that we've talked about a little bit in passing, certainly you read Astro Ball just like I did. The Astros, the value that they put on spin rate, on guys throwing breaking balls, specifically the slider, and you look at some of the Orioles pitchers who've been around the last couple of years who throw the slider and have thrown it effectively. Michael Gibbons, Tanner Scott to a lesser degree, but certainly has a slider that when it's good, it's really good. Dylan Bundy's the big one I think that people will look to, and even someone on the margins like Jimmy Yacobonis. I want to see what pitchers like that look like with new eyes, new minds, new analytics, these high-speed, high-definition cameras looking at the release point, trying to figure out how to improve guys' spin rate. And, look, that doesn't mean all those guys are going to work out, but can the Orioles develop a couple diamonds in the rough, a couple guys that suddenly turn into a Miguel Gonzalez type, And then, hey, you can either hold on to that guy or you can flip that guy for more talent. I mean, they're still very much in a sell mode right now. Let's be totally honest about that. If Alex Cobb or Andrew Kashner or Jonathan VR or Michael Gibbons or even Dylan Bundy, who's now 2 years away from free agency.
You know what, man? If you and I were going to be interested this year, we should do like a Deadpool on players and saying who's not going to be here. So you got Weddle, Suggs, like these Crabtree. Throw them in and then throw all these baseball players in and figure out who's still going to be around here in, let's say, like August, right? That would be an amazing thing to sort of put some numbers on, put some odds on, and say who's going to be around and who's not. This is going to be a major year of transition. Flacco is the beginning of a lot of things going on with sports in our community, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the Orioles already started it at the end of midway through last year, and to what you just mentioned, I mean, I meant to write this at some point, and I don't know if I will. I mean, I don't know if there's a full-blown piece there, but I find it fascinating that Adam Jones and Joe Flacco depart in a very short period of time, assuming Jones isn't going to be brought back. And I guess there's still some small percent chance that could happen as long as he's not signed and that he's still out there. But I find those two individuals, and look, Flacco got to the pinnacle as a Super Bowl MVP, winning a championship. Jones never took the Orioles to a World Series, but he was, the face of the franchise for a number of years. And I feel like both of those individuals, so many people pointed to them for what they didn't do rather than appreciate what they did do. I think we've seen that big time with Joe Flacco, and maybe people appreciated Adam Jones a little bit more the last couple years, knowing that this thing was winding down and clearly seeing what happened last year and seeing the writing on the wall. But we always talked about what with Jones? Oh, he's not disciplined, and he swings at the low and away slider, and he doesn't have a great on-base percentage. But he was just a really good player for a long time, and I just think both of those guys, there was always some kind of parallel between those two, at least in my mind. Maybe I'm off base on that, but I felt those were two guys that weren't necessarily appreciated as much as they should have been around here. And like I said, Jones, I think very late, the last couple years, I think people came around on that a little bit, but this is definitely a new time for the Orioles, and it's just so strange. I mean, you have Trey Mancini, who's almost a locker room leader at this point. I know he bought chicken for the entire team after the spring training opener. That was a Jones.
They're already sacrificing chickens, man. Yeah, it's only February.
But I mean, there's something.
I'll bring Joe Boo's rum.
There are some interesting aspects to this if you can try to get beyond the fact that wins and losses are going to be painful. But it's a new regime, new mindset. I will say this, and look, not that I necessarily expect players to be complaining the first 10 days of spring training, but it seems like Brandon Hyde has brought a very upbeat attitude towards this roster right now.
I hope someday they unban me. I'd like to meet. He seems like a right guy to me.
Yeah, I mean,
like he just does.
And look, I mean, the key is going to be, can he maintain this same level of positivity? Does he know when to kick a guy in the butt? When it's warranted, when a guy needs to pick it up, and does he know when to put his arm around someone when it's a young player that's just struggling? They've lost 7 out of 8. It's 95 degrees in the third week of August. They're 40 games below 500, whatever the scenario is. So that's going to be the real challenge in knowing whether he can maintain this type of good karma, good vibes, positive attitudes, good outlooks, everyone concerned about the process and getting better. But it seems like it's been a kumbaya kind of start to the spring from that standpoint. Again, what is that worth? I don't know. Probably not much, but I think it's different. It's new. Doesn't mean it's going to be better, but I think you are interested to see how some of these young guys respond to a new regime. And frankly, let's face it, we were talking about the fact that even though the Orioles might have been ahead of the curve a little bit with infield shifting and some other measures like that, over the last few years they had really fallen behind big time when it comes to analytics and new ways of looking at the game. And some of the players have even acknowledged that. Some of the players that were traded last trade deadline, Kevin Gausman talked about it in Atlanta, so much more information he was privy to. Zach Britton in New York. I mean, so it was very clear that the Orioles didn't have that. So the good thing is now they are implementing those types of things and more information and a coaching staff that's going to be on the same page as the front office. Who among these incumbents can benefit? Now, most of these guys that are going to be on this roster this year are not going to be around the next time the Orioles are contending. I think we all know that. But whether it's a Cedric Mullins who can take his game to another level, whether it's a Trey Mancini who might take his offensive game to another level with some tips, with some new information. A number of young pitchers, whether you're talking about a Tanner Scott, go down the list of so many different guys that they have right now at AAA, AA, guys that are going to be coming up through this system the next few years. Can they develop pitching more consistently? So I think the big key here is for this process to be expedited, for this process to be to speed up, for the Orioles to be good again sooner rather than later. And when I say sooner, I mean maybe 2021 rather than 2023. Inevitably, that means they're going to have some talent in this organization. I don't think the cupboard's bare, but I've said this to you, and I'll continue to say this. When Jeffrey Luhnow and Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal were in Houston, George Springer was already in that organization. Jose Altuve was already in that organization. Dallas Keuchel was already in that organization. That's not to take anything away from them. It just speaks to, chances are, maybe there aren't three of those guys like that in the Orioles system right now, but I'd venture to say there might be one, there might be two. You hope that the first overall pick in June is another guy like that. My point is, can they, with analytics and a new coaching staff and new eyes and new ideas and just a fresh start for everyone, top to bottom in this organization, can they cultivate and develop some talent that I think is there? You know, whether it's a D.L. Hall, whether it's a Grayson Rodriguez, whether it's Hunter Harvey finally staying healthy, who knows? We mentioned Diaz already, Ryan Mountcastle. If they can figure out a position for him, I think people absolutely expect him to hit at the major league level. Whether he's going to be a first baseman, whether he's going to end up being a DH, they think he's going to hit. And he's turned some heads early on this spring, from what I understand. But can they salvage a few guys at the very least that look like they're going to be real players for them? And then over the next couple of years, influx of more talent through the draft, through the international market, and then, you hope by second half of 2021, 2022, 2023, you hope the Orioles are back in a position where they're relevant from a wins and losses standpoint again. Long way to go for that, but again, I've said this to you, I'll continue to say it. There are a lot of things that still need to be fixed and improved with this organization, but I think from a head of baseball ops standpoint, Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal, and everything I've seen so far from Brandon Hyde, that's still a little more of an unknown, but I think you have to feel good about the direction. That said, doesn't mean that it's going to be remotely pretty in the standings this year. Again, if they can avoid 100 losses, that would be something that I don't want to say is successful, because that's not successful.
Well, you can win the bet at 103, dude.
Yeah,
I'm giving it to you right now, 58.5 to make you laugh.
I mean, let's just look at this pragmatically. A 15-game improvement from one year to the next for any team, that's pretty sizable improvement. The Orioles could lose 100 games and improve by 15 games this year. That just shows how disastrous and just how far they had fallen into the abyss last year. And it's going to take some time to climb out, but I hope, even over these next couple years, they start to identify, and I'm going to use a phrase from Buck Showalter, a term that he used, they can find some nuggets along the way and then hopefully add plenty more over the next couple years.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. We'll be talking some baseball this year, one way or another. It's certainly on Wednesday night. You'll want to join us out on Facebook Live and our YouTube WNSTV channel as I go through my tunes of information and scorecards and, ticket stubs, my Luis Aparicio Heartland statue, all sorts of stuff. But we're going to go through it on Wednesday night. Luke's going to be here on the backside of the Terps game. It'll be fun to do it on the internet as well as our watch party during the Oscars. At least our show had a host on Sunday night, so there's my little sidekick at the Oscars. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Luke, of course, will be in Owings Mills when called upon this week. The Owings Mills folks are all in Indianapolis, and we are conscientiously objecting so that I can support the folks of the National Kidney Foundation on Thursday night at their Sante event down at the American Visionary Arts Museum. And so I can do There Goes My Hero events this week with Daryl Green, which I did this week down with the great folks that I met at Link Systems. And I want to make sure I get all that right. Excuse me, Link Services. I want to get that right. George Hall, whose sister needs a bone marrow transplant, and we're swabbing for the bone marrow registry. Keep the carrier, lose the headache. Link. So there's your plug for Link for those good folks down there at Silo Point who are doing some nice stuff. All right. I already told how you can find me. I'm going to be around all week. We're going to be around all month. I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm writing a letter to Joe Flacco. I'm writing a letter to Steve Bisciotti. I don't know. I think I'm leaving the Orioles alone, and I'm definitely starting the Baltimore positive movement. So you'll be hearing more about that. Don Moeller and I will be telling you more about that. I'm busy. It's 2019. I'm a very available individual. You want to find me? Send me a note, nasty at WNST.net. We are at WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.